Hey Stampers, Kim from StampingImperfection.com. Welcome to my craft room. I wanted to talk today a little about card layers for people who are just starting stamping. If you're starting to make cards, maybe you start out with single layer cards and you do some fun techniques. Like here's a card my friend Shelly made, and she did some, if you can see the embossing, she did some embossing, she did some paper piercing, and this is really a beautiful, she used her framelits and her punches. This is really a beautiful card with a single layer and a few stamping techniques. Here's one that I made. I did a video on this, my bright embossing, and again, this is a single layer card, although I did cut out some of my flowers with dimensionals and pop them up with the framelits. I cut out some flowers with framelits, popped them up on dimensionals, but this is an embossed card. So that's another technique, and these are both single layer cards and they're quite pretty. However, when you get a little farther into stamping, sometimes you want to do layers of cards. You want to just make layers, or you want to make it look like it's matted. Here's a card that I posted on my blog today at StampingImperfection.com. And what I'd like to show you is there are two different basic cards that I make. Here's one of them. Card that opens like this, or I could turn it this way and open it like this. I have lots of cards that open both ways. This is the same basic size of cardstock. I started with one sheet of cardstock, just like this, one 8.5 by 11. I cut it in half, so this is cut at 5.5. So when I lined my paper up, I lined my paper up so the edge of it was in my stamping trimmer, and right here's 5, here's 5.5. So I lined it up like that, and I just cut it with my stamping trimmer, and I got a card like this. Now what I'll do is, since my trimmer also has a scoring blade, this is now 5.5 by 8.5. I'll turn this sideways, just like this, and the beauty of the Stampin' Trimmer is that this grid pattern is 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to line this up with 4 1/4, and I'm pushing this all the way up to the top. Then the light gray blade is my scoring blade. So I just go back and forth a couple of times, and I get a little score line. I'm just going to fold this, and I'm going to use my bone folder. And the beauty of this big platform, the bone folder gives me a really nice, crisp, clear fold. So this gives me a card that I can either open like this or like this. Now I could leave it as a single layer and just stamp something and cut it out with a framelit, or maybe I want to put a mat on top. And here's one. My card ends up being 4 1/4 by 5.5 when I cut it that way. In fact, all my cards end up being that way, but this one I can open like this or like this. The mat is 1/4 inch smaller, and you can see I have quite a bit of matte showing. I actually like a lot of matte showing. So the white, Whisper White around it is cut at 4 by 5 1/4. It is 1/4 inch smaller on each side. So I cut it out at 4 by 5 1/4 and then just put it on with snail. I did the same thing here. I still have 1/4 of an inch smaller, but I cut a white piece and a red piece, and then I cut each one in about half. And then I ended up with, by doing that, I ended up basically with 2 cards. Because every time you cut a piece of cardstock in half, you have enough to make 2 cards. So I cut a red mat and a white mat, cut those in half, and I ended up with 2 complete cards when I was all done. So that's another idea. Now another way to cut your card is to cut it the long way, like this. When I put this in, I line it up with 4 1/4 over here on the side. I just slide the paper in, line it up with 4 1/4, cut it so it comes out to be 4 1/4 by 11, and then I'm going to turn it sideways like this, and I'm going to pull this through until it's at 5.5, and then I'm going to score it at 5.5, fold it in half, use my bone folder, and then I'm going to get a card. I'm going to get a card just like this that opens this way, or I can turn it sideways and open the long way. I'm going to do the same thing. This is still 4 1/4 by 5.5, so I'm still going to cut my mat at 4 by 5 1/4. And that's going to give me about 1/8 of an inch of mat all around. Now if I want it a little smaller, every now and then I want it a little smaller. I don't want quite so much mat. Like here's another card that I made that I'll be actually posting and talking about on Wednesday. And again, I have, it's a 1/4 of an inch difference between the matte and the card. Here I'm using Pretty in Pink and Whisper White, and they're a 1/4 of an inch difference, which gives me about 1/8 of an inch of the matte showing. Now on the designer series paper underneath, I cut my paper. This was cut at 3 inches by 1 1/4 maybe, or 1 1/2, and I cut my Whisper White matte around that only 1/8 inch larger, so I'm just getting a peak of white around the edge. I have a little bit more here than I do here because I just wanted a little touch of white. So if I cut this, let's say this is cut 1 by 3, my white matte is going to be cut 1 1/8 by 3 1/8. So that just gives me a tiny peak of matte. So usually, if you just want a smidgen, you cut your matte 1/8 inch larger, both the width and the length. And then if you want more, you cut your cardstock, or in this case you would cut your matte. There's a 1/4 of an inch difference between the length and a 1/4 of an inch difference between the width between the matte and the card. So that's how that works. And again, you get cards that open like this. I did a lot of this size today. Or you get cards like this one that open this way. And of course you can turn both of these sideways and you get either kind of card. So this is 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2. This is 5 1/2 by 8 1/2, scored at 4 1/4. And I will put those dimensions down there for you. And you'll also find something on my website at stampingimperfection.com called Stamping 101, Stamping Lessons and Videos, where you will find more information if you are a beginning stamper and you just want to learn how to stamp, what materials you need to start with. You can find that over at stampingimperfection.com. On the menu bar you will find Stamping 101, Stamping Lessons, and if you click on that link, it'll take you to a page that has tons of information like this for beginner stampers. So head on over, and while you're there, sign up for my mailing list at stampingimperfection.com. You'll get 3 video tutorials over the next couple of days in your email, and you'll also get a couple newsletters every month with card ideas and tips and tricks on how to use some of the tools that you're purchasing. Because you're buying all that stuff, you should be using all that stuff, and I'd like to show you how to do that. So go ahead and stop by stampingimperfection.com, and if you go to my Facebook page at facebook.com/stampingimperfection and like my Facebook page, you'll find 2 tabs that you will get access to as soon as you like the page, and you can print some printable stuff that you can cut and use on cards or scrapbook pages. And I change that every so often, so once you like the page, you can just keep checking to see if there's new freebie stuff up there for you to print and use as a thank you from me. So thanks for watching.